hello, welcome back to the channel. It's me, Emmy the Cat Lady, and you join me. We're back here in New Vegas at the Grub and Gulp rest stop. Gonna go for a wander through Vault 34 while we chat about the season finale, season 2 of Fallout on Prime. It's finished now, and it's certainly a very interesting episode, so there's quite a lot of things to talk about. We've obviously got answers to some questions, and more questions raised as well. Obviously setting up for season 3, which is fair enough. So there's quite a lot going on, and there's several storylines kind of happening all at once here. It's very, very interesting. So the first thing I want to talk about is Legion. So we've kind of checked back in with the Legion. We haven't seen them for a few episodes after the Ghoul decided to start off their civil war again. So they've started, fighting against each other. Both sides of the Legion are fighting each other, and that's all very dramatic. And then during the battle, the Lacerta legate grabs Caesar's body and takes it into a tent so that he can read the note of who Caesar or Kaiser named as his heir. And yeah, it ends with me, which I found quite funny, but also kind of satisfying. Definitely seemed in keeping with the character of Caesar in the games that we see. He thought he knew everything. He is a man that massively overestimates his own intellect, I would say, and he thinks he's a lot smarter than he actually is. So, take that as you will. Here's some golden geckos. They like hanging around the radiation and stuff. So, that was kind of interesting. So, obviously, the legate has decided that nobody else can know about this, so he eats the note, which is one way of getting rid of it, and declares himself the new Caesar, which is fair enough. I can never remember how you get into Vault 34. Let's be up this way somewhere. So, that was very, very interesting kind of course of action, and he's now taking charge of the Legion, and they are going to march on Vegas, and they're going to, it is, they're going to create Kaiser's Palace, which is really, that made me laugh as well. I mean, certainly, it's a very nice hotel. That's where I did stay. I had a lovely room in Caesar's Palace when I went to Vegas, which was December 2008, so that was quite a long time ago. I had a jacuzzi bathtub and everything. It was very nice room, very nice view over the strip and everything. So I quite enjoyed that cheeky little reference. That was quite funny. Honestly, surprised that nobody kind of did that before, but never mind. Just it's obviously a very cheeky, tongue-in-cheek. Oh, you got some ammo. Thank you. Tongue-in-cheek reference, but obviously the Legion are still going to be a problem. Not a big surprise that would be the case with the Legion. And the thing about Caesar is that he wanted his people to believe that he was unstoppable. He was the son of Mars, which is the Roman war god, and that a lot of people that were close to him and that were heavily involved in the Legion basically knew that if Caesar died or when Caesar died, the Legion wouldn't last, certainly not in its current state. It would fall apart, and by and large that's what seems to happen when Caesar dies. Legate Linnaeus doesn't know how to lead a civilization unless he is going to war all the time. That's the only thing he really knows and understands. So he's not going to be, once they've conquered all of the West, if that's what they manage to do, what's he going to do? Because he doesn't know how to actually manage the community behind the Legion in the same way that Caesar did. He certainly was good enough at kind of manipulating people and convincing people of things. Um, yeah, there's basically a bunch of ghouls in this vault, and some of them are vault tech security. Um, yeah, you can see that everything fell apart, but there's a magazine. So yeah, I think that's going to be interesting to see how that goes with Macaulay Culkin in charge. That's going to be interesting. And then we talk about Mr. House and what he says to the ghoul. It all feels very much spot on for Mr. House and how he likes to operate and how he thinks. He mentions people wanting to come after him and things, and definitely could be referencing a specific courier, could also be referencing Benny as well, because it's entirely possible that he knew that Benny was intending to work against him, and he knew that the Emertas were planning something, even if he didn't know exactly what that might be. So, because that's how Mr. House operates. He's a he's a oh, he fell down. There we go. So that's how Mr. House likes to operate. He wants to have all the data, and he expects people to give him what he wants. He will give people something if they give him something. Any kind of dealings with Mr. House, it's transactional. That's the way he operates. Just like what he did with the platinum chip. I mean, he spent a long time paying people to search for the platinum chip. Until he found it. He went to great expense and spent a lot of time and a lot of caps on trying to get this platinum chip and get it back so that he can continue his plans. And that's obviously what can eventually happen unless the courier decides to take him out. But it is possible to take House out without killing him as well. Remember, you can just disconnect him from his network and leave him alive. If you open his chamber, he'll eventually die from microbial exposure because being on fancy life support for all that time does kind of mean that his immune system is made of tissue paper, most likely. So, there's that kind of thing going on there with Mr. House. But he says everyone ends up working for me eventually, and that's pretty true. I mean, he bought Repcon, he owned his own casino, and basically owned the strip, which means that he basically owned Vegas. He had, by and large, had a lot of involvement with General Atomics. He even bought H&H Tools right under his brother's nose. He had a lot of investment, a lot of money in Vault Tech as well, as we know. So there's no doubt in my mind that he would try and find a way to survive, even if the real body was killed by the courier. Again, we don't have any confirmation on that. We probably won't get confirmation on that because they have said that they don't want to specifically canonize any one particular ending, which makes sense because there's so many possibilities in this game for how the game could end. And if they were to pick one, then the people that didn't like that ending and wanted a different one would be upset, and it would just, it's the kind of thing they don't want to take that away from the players. Really, that we can still, feel like the ending that we got and that we liked is the one. But it's yeah, it's always a bit of a complicated issue, and that's why, they are essentially not choosing a specific canon ending, and then obviously a lot of time has passed, so whatever happened at the end of Fallout New Vegas, things could have changed since then, because that's how time works. Because even if the Legion lose, it doesn't mean they're completely wiped out. If the NCR lose, that doesn't mean they're completely wiped out, so it makes sense to me. But they're never going to confirm, like, for example, the Securitron that's lying in front of the control panel. Nobody's going to confirm, oh yeah, that's definitely yes, man. That's just not a thing that they're going to do, but it's enough to hint that, this might be Yes Man. It could be. And that's the point. The possibility is the point. That's kind of what they're trying to do with that. So it is entirely on purpose, which you may like it, you may not like it, but that's obviously the decision that's made, and that's probably the reason that that decision was made. Yeah, so a lot of this is kind of blocked off. It's a bad vault. Everything went wrong in this vault, unsurprisingly. So some of the residents left and became the boomers, and then a whole bunch of them stayed and became ghouls, because the place is starting to fall apart, which is fun. So yeah, and I think the thing that people are forgetting is that, they're not retelling the games. I mean, they could have easily done a series where they got Liam Neeson in and they cast somebody to be the Lone Wanderer and they retold the story of Fallout 3, or they could have done that, but it wouldn't have been as good, because again, with these stories they have different approaches that you can take for them. Then picking one ending, picking one path through that story kind of cancels everything else out and takes away all those options. So what they're doing is they're telling a new story in the same context. But everything that I've seen in Mr. House in this season very much fits with the kind of character that he is. It ties into what he says, what he does, and we can really trust that he's doing what he says he's going to do, and we can trust that he's going to behave like you would expect him to behave. So none of it that House has done really surprises me in the slightest. It all kind of makes sense to me that this is how Mr. House would actually handle these kinds of situations. But we've got some interesting new context for some of the things that have happened in the past, which I like. So we discovered that Diane Welch, the Congresswoman, is alive. Unfortunately for her, she's alive, but not in a particularly pleasant way, as a disembodied head that is being force fed and kept alive to control all the people of the wasteland that Hank has put his mind control devices into, which is lovely. So Lucy is she wants to try and help this woman, thinking, what, all this technology and all this crazy stuff that I've seen, we could do something for her. But reattaching a severed head isn't exactly an easy thing to do. And, she wants to help, which is obviously very nice of her and very sweet. But at this point, I feel like for this woman, there's nothing that can be done for her at this point other than to kill her, and that's what she asks Lucy to do. Lucy's obviously reluctant. Fair enough, really. Can't blame her for that. But sometimes, when somebody's living a miserable existence and there's no saving them, there's no helping them, I'm glad that Lucy saw enough sense to put an end to this woman's suffering. From what we've seen, it seems like her heart's in the right place, and she's paid a horrible price for that. And Lucy, obviously, she has a thing about not wanting to kill people, which is commendable and understandable and reasonable. But there are situations where ending someone's life is absolutely the most compassionate thing to do, same as it is for animals. And this is something that I know, I have coached so many people to making these kinds of decisions for their beloved pets over the years. It's always hard, and it does come with a sense of guilt, especially, even if you're doing it for their own good, because they're in pain, they're suffering, they have no quality of life left. You're doing the right thing for them, but because you're actively choosing, instead of just letting someone pass away peacefully, if you're actively choosing to take an action that is going to result in their life ending, there is guilt associated with that, because you start thinking about the what ifs, and maybe there is something that we can do. I've just noticed that the back of this gun says "had it coming" on it, which is quite funny. Anyway, um, interrupting a very serious topic for that conversation. Um, but it's one of these things. So Lucy has kind of learned that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone in a really bad situation is to let them die. And I would say that's certainly the case for Diane Welch here. Um, Getting to Vault 31 crew, all our buds, junior executives. I definitely enjoy seeing them all get eaten by the radroaches, which are the most pathetic enemy in the games by and large. So, they're the ones that are really easy to take out. And all these kids, I mean, they were generally speaking seem to be fairly young. Um, and I think it has an interesting kind of theme to it that these people who thought they were above it all, they were going to be the elite. When the bombs fell, they were going to be in charge of the wasteland and the new society that Vault-Tec was going to build and all the rest of it. But they couldn't even handle the radroaches, and I think it just kind of proves that they're not equipped for the wasteland. They didn't bring any weapons with them. All they had were their backpacks, and they took food supplies and things. They didn't bring any weapons. They were managers, they were executives, and you're going to need more than a Vault-Tec handbook to be able to survive the horrors that are in the wasteland. I think Norm might have that in him. I think he just has to realise that he's got it in him, and he's going to do quite well, even if he doesn't quite see it yet. But Claudia, she survived, which is good. I quite liked her. She was a fish out of water even before they got to the wasteland, so I think it's going to be interesting seeing her and Norm travel together and what they end up doing. It did seem like we did just kind of throw out all these people, but I do like it thematically because it's proven, that these people are prepared to be overseers in Vault 32 and 33 until Reclamation Day or whatever the plan is after that, that they're not really equipped for going out into the wasteland with the giant monsters and the raiders and all the warring factions and things like that. Whereas someone like Hank, he clearly was prepared for it. He oh oh, it's gone again. I got a teleporting skeleton here, guys. Oh, it's yep. Nope, never mind. Anyway, hi guys. So, I think that's going to be very, very interesting to see. And I did love some of the details. And, when Norm goes into the room where they're all dead, that the disembodied hand was stuck on the door handle and then the bobblehead on the table. I find that quite funny, and it does fit in with some of the set pieces we encounter in the games where, it's kind of gory potentially, but a little bit silly too, and not taking itself entirely too seriously. I'm quite enjoying seeing Maximus and Thaddeus bond as buddies after what they've been through. Obviously, Thaddeus used to bully Maximus, and then Maximus convinced him he was like Titus, and there was that kind of betrayal. But since then, they seem to have kind of decided to be friends after fleeing the Brotherhood together. So I'm liking the little kind of bromance that's going on between them, even if I'm a bit worried about exactly what Thaddeus is going to turn into at this point, because people have kind of suspected it might be that he's becoming a centaur, and certainly don't think we can rule that out as a possibility at this point. So, we'll have to see exactly what happens there, but I think, yeah, I don't think it's gonna go too well for him. But Maximus is coming into his own now, and I think it's there's obviously they're throwing in a little bit of that dark humor here that all the Freesiders have decided they're going to start taking bets on whether Maximus survives this battle of attrition with the death clause. And even when that woman says, "Oh, if he loses, we're all dead," that, and then they're just like, "Yeah, so Here's the odds. I want to put 50 caps on him loose. Like, it's just funny. And again, it fits in, with gambling and Vegas. It's what, the place is all about. So it doesn't surprise me that they're taking bets on these things. And then, Thaddeus is trying to get attention and he's waving his detached arm around and things. It's just really bringing a little bit of dark humour into what is actually quite a serious situation. But it's nice to see that Thaddeus has some faith in Maximus that he's going to be able to win against these death claws. But it is a bit of a battle of attrition. Death claws are powerful enemies, and it doesn't matter how good your weapons and your power armor is. With their numbers, it is possible to get overwhelmed and to potentially lose, and that does happen. Obviously, the power armor does eventually take too much damage, and he has to get out of it if he's going to survive at all. But his stubbornness, his durability, and his kind of resilience is on display here. Because even without the armor, he's still like, no, I need to keep fighting here. And he grabs a roulette wheel and a pool cue, which is probably not going to do much against the most dangerous beasts in the wasteland. But it did put me in mind of a Greek hoplite, which is kind of a fun contrast when you look at, the Legion's Roman theme. That Thaddeus is, not Thaddeus, Maximus is kind of, you know, uh, given it's given Greek hoplite. It's a very interesting visual, I think. At that point, what is that? Is that a train? But taking on a bunch of death claws like this, it's definitely a battle of attrition. And of course, can't really not talk about the scene of the NCR Ranger sniping from the rooftop. Just in case you've forgotten that we are in New Vegas, I've seen people on social media calling that scene absolute cinema, and I agree. The NCR aren't completely gone, and they're here to clean up the mess, which is really good because the Legion's on its way. War never changes, and the conflict between the bear and the bull is never ending, it seems. Again, not surprising. Earlier in the season, the legate spelled out that, the Legion are at war with the NCR. They're at war with everybody else as well, but, the NCR are their old enemy. This has been the stumbling block for the Legion's progress for quite a long time. So, it's proven to be very, very interesting that, we're kind of seeing this, and we're going to be seeing this conflict possibly over the city now instead of over Hoover Dam. So looking forward to that. But yeah, that scene with the sniper rifle is just, yeah, absolute perfection. I loved the way it looked. So now we need to talk about Hank and about Lucy, because I really dislike this guy. And I mean that in the best possible way. He does make for a good antagonist, because I do really, really dislike this guy, and that's kind of what you want. He's not supposed to be a good guy. He's supposed to be the bad guy, and he plays that really, really well. But he talks about who he's really working for, and it's becoming clearer and clearer that he means the Enclave. So the Enclave are who he's been secretly working for, probably for quite some time at this stage, which is interesting. And he talks about Robert House being a bit of a robot himself, and I'm not sure exactly what he's meaning there, if he's meaning a literal sense, because he uses his technology to keep himself alive all these years and all the rest of it. Or if he means it as a metaphor, because House doesn't really care about people, he only cares about money and making money, which is kind of true. So it's whether he's talking about him as a robot, as in he doesn't really have any feelings, he's a sociopath, or whether it's the intention is that he's, it's a more literal kind of interpretation of being a robot. Oh yeah, the cap counterfeiting shack. And yeah, there's the Cazadors. Oh, there's 5 million of them. That's why I turn combat off for these, because I can't be bothered dealing with all the the monsters. I just want to wander the Mojave. In fact, is that the fort in the distance there? Yeah. Oh, we got some prickly pear, but not barrel cactus. Never mind. Yep, there's the dam in the distance. But I think it's quite funny that he brings up the Myers-Briggs personality type, as it is something a lot of corporations use when they're assessing job applicants, that they'll maybe get them to go through a Myers-Briggs personality test as part of the hiring process and use that to decide whether they're going to be a good fit for the team or whatever. How useful it is, I'm not sure, but I did do the test once and I am an INFJ, which is kind of interesting. But then he's doing that thing again where he's infantilizing Lucy and he's talking to her like she's a child. And I'm sorry, but daddy's job is complicated, sweetie. It's so, what the heck is that? That's so creepy. She's not a 5-year-old asking too many questions. She's a grown ass woman who knows right and wrong. And it's really creepy that he keeps talking to her like that. It just, ugh, I hate it. And I knew he was going to do this and he was going to try and control her. If he couldn't convince her to be on his side the normal way, then he was going to try and force her with the mind control thing. And I really hate it. And it's horrible. But thankfully, the ghoul makes it just in time to save Lucy from her daddy. And I really love that callback to the moment with Lucy where he's saying, like, I know you think you're trying to help by shooting people in the ass, but it's not. So he does that and lets Lucy decide what's to be done with her father, which shows a bit of growth from him, because I think previously to meeting Lucy and getting to know her, I think he might have just shot him in the head and that would have been it done. But he left it up to her to make that decision. And he does admit to who he was working for and that the wasteland experiment has begun. But before Lucy can demand any more answers from him, he just deletes his memories. Formats the hard drive. Although whether that is what he's done, I don't know if this process is going to be reversible. That's a big question for me, is that, is that something that can be undone, or is that it now that Hank's just no more? And that's something that I'm quite concerned about, because it could be, he's put everything in the recycle bin that his brain can't access, or whether everything's just been deleted. So it means that he doesn't have to face up to the consequences of his actions. He doesn't have to deal with Lucy's decisions about, her judgment on what he's done. It might suggest that maybe he does have some guilty feelings in there about what he's been doing. It's hard to say, but either way, him doing that means that he's not dealing with any consequences for his actions, and he's not having to explain himself to Lucy, which I really dislike. And as a form of suicide, really, because he's taken away who he was. Like, the memories are all gone. He doesn't recognise his own daughter. But I will come back to that later on. And then the ghoul stays behind and he finds the cryopods where his wife and daughter are supposed to be, and they're not there. So we've got another bait and switch. They're gone. They're not where they're supposed to be. But then he finds a postcard about Colorado, which calls back to the conversation in the past about going to Bakersfield, or even going further afield and moving to Colorado. So I think that's where he's going to go next, and that's where he is maybe expecting to find them. But he walks away from Mr. House, and Robert's not going to be happy about that situation. But it does nicely set up a journey for the ghoul in season 3. And the thing that he says is that he now has proof that his family are alive, and that gives him hope. That postcard, finding that, gives him hope, which, he's been driven by this want to find his wife, to find his daughter, to find out what happened to them. That's what's kept him going all this time. 220 something years, near enough at this point, 220 years. So he, having that hope that, proof that they're alive somewhere, that makes a man dangerous to his enemies. It's, I mean, don't get me wrong, people that feel they've nothing left to live for, they've nothing left to lose, can also be dangerous. But knowing that whatever it is that he's trying to do isn't impossible, knowing that there's the chance that he's going to find what he's looking for, he's going to succeed. That's going to be enough to keep him going, and it's going to help him stave off the federalisation process. It's going to keep him on the road to achieving his goals. So it's a really powerful moment for this character, both the Ghoul and Cooper Howard, because while I talk about them as separate characters, they kind of are, but they obviously also are the same person, just based on different experiences and things, and different complications in their lives. So yeah, it's kind of a wee bit of an unsatisfying ending to him, but at least, giving him that hope, that positive, like, feeling that yes, I might be able to find them. That is quite powerful for him. And we are jumping into the flashbacks while this is all happening as well. Where Mr. House can even control the payphones at McCarran Airport. And unfortunately, it seems that our friend Cooper has trusted the wrong people again, and he has got himself into trouble. Mr. House wants him to know that I'm not responsible for what's about to happen. And that's why he's phoning the airport, which is hilarious. But, he's saying that I just want you to know that what's about to happen to you is not my doing, it's someone else. And I knew he shouldn't have given that diode to the president. I knew that was going to be a bad idea. That's obviously how the Enclave came to possess it in the first place. There's no question about that. But he made a sacrifice here. He told Barb to deny all knowledge, that he acted alone, she had absolutely nothing to do with it. And then he says for her, and that's what he wants, is to make sure that Janie is safe. So he's like, we can't both go down for this, because what's going to happen to Janie? She's going to end up in the foster care system or something, or any number of possibilities, some of them that don't really bear thinking about. So he wants her to just to have nothing to do with it. He'll take the fall for the whole situation, and that's going to be the end of things. So he obviously gets arrested, presumably by federal agents, not just normal kind of law enforcement. Um, and it's quite brutal as well, because it's very public. It's happening in the middle of McCarran Airport. It's not like they went to his house. And remember that Cooper Howard is famous. He's a celebrity. He's a movie star, and he's been in all the Vault-Tec adverts that you see in the airport and plastered all over billboards and things like that. So, to see this man get arrested in public, it's quite brutal for him. And it's going to get people talking. It's going to get gossip columns and newspapers talking. Why was Cooper Howard arrested? What has he done? All that kind of thing. Because famous people, like when normal people commit crimes, it can feature in the news, but when famous people commit crimes, it's a big deal, and it's brutal. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Obviously, by the time the bombs fell, he obviously wasn't in prison, and he is having time with his daughter, but they mentioned alimony, so I'm guessing that he must have made some kind of deal with the government or some kind of arrangement. And the divorce from his wife could be for optics. It could be that she has to publicly reject him and denounce him for what he's done. That helps her have the ability to deny all knowledge of it. So, if they've then split up, it might not be that they wanted to separate. It might be that, she had to publicly denounce him and say, no, after what you've done. And that's potentially why that's happened. So I think that's an interesting kind of twist on the breakdown of their marriage, that it might not have been because of that they fell out and fell apart. It could be that she had to do it so that her employers potentially believed that she had nothing to do with it, and the government believed that she had nothing to do with it. Oh, is that some fire geckos hanging out with some, who are you guys? Powder gangers. Fair enough. Interesting. So yeah, I guess we'll find out. I'm sure we're going to get more of their story in season 3 and exactly what happened between them. Because obviously, if Janie's with Barb wherever they ended up, she was with Cooper at the time the bombs fell. So we still haven't really had that explained. That how he ended up getting separated from her. Did he take her to where Barb was so that she could take her to whatever vault, or we don't really know, and it's kind of frustrating that that still hasn't really been explained at this point. But I'm assuming that we are going to find out going forward in season 3. So then we go back to Stephanie, who I love this character. I think she's absolutely fantastic. She's getting a bit of her backstory and things, and we find out that, Coop's been the best wingman, and she basically spent all night talking to Hank, and he proposed after knowing her for, I don't know, anything from a few hours to a day or two. It's not very clear of the timeline there, but for them to get engaged that quickly, that's kind of wild. Obviously, she is very convincing and wants to get her foot in the door with Vault-Tec. That's exactly what she kind of set out to do. So it clearly worked, which is great for her. I kind of love that for her. It was nice to see McCarran Airport all shiny and new before the NCR moved in as well in its heyday, which is actually, I think I've just wandered to the airport. That looks like an air traffic control tower, right? Yeah, there we go. Wasn't even intentional, but here we are at McCarran International Airport. I say I was surprised when I went to Vegas, in real life, just how close the airport is to the strip and the main kind of centre of the city. It's fascinating. But it's kind of a weird thing because he mentions how he misses Norm and he misses Betty and then Stephanie and Stephanie and I don't know. It's kind of weird because obviously he's aged beyond her because he got unfrozen before she did, which puts her closer in age to Lucy because she's been frozen in time. Yes, that was me, I think. So that was something that happened. It's Yeah, it's just kind of a little bit creepy, but obviously they both married other people as well, and I'm guessing that their duty just required them to not acknowledge their past relationship. And since the law doesn't really exist anymore, bigamy charges aren't a thing. I don't know how legally binding a Vault-Tec wedding would be. At the end of the day, who cares really, I guess, is the point. But it's a bit of a weird thing, but clearly she did what she had to do to get what she wanted, and that seemed to be successful. And then we finally find out what's in that keepsake box of Hank's. She obviously knew about it. It's the Enclave, which I had certainly started to suspect, and given that the beginning where Wilzig escaped with the diode, it was clear that the Enclave were going to end up being involved at some point. The old enemy, the super mutant mentioned it as well, so I'm not massively surprised by that. When it was clear that it wasn't Mr. House that he was reporting to, the Enclave was the other kind of lead suspect, and she's confirmed it. So this is the other player at the table that's been the other player at the table this whole time. So it seems like Hank might have spilled some classified secrets to his blushing bride. I don't know if she was directly working for them or not, but she clearly knew enough to know about this phase 2 that they've been talking about. And it suggests that Badaskins also was involved in the phase 2 since his personal assistant apparently knew a bit about it. And it's unclear exactly what phase 2 is, and this is something that I have kind of criticised the Institute for as well, is just that, everybody talks about this phase 2, and that's kind of, they're taking a leaf out of the Institute's book where they're trying to make it sound scary but get you curious, like, oh, what do you mean phase two? What is that? But it gets mentioned so many times that it kind of loses its impact a little bit, because we don't know what it is, and we uh, we haven't really had any real breadcrumbs to kind of indicate what it is, other than these mind control devices that Hank's been working on making miniatures so that they go unnoticed. And is that all part of it, or is that a separate thing? It's hard to tell. But I guess we'll find out in season three. But it's one of these things that I think they're not quite giving us enough to be able to kind of speculate on what it might mean. But they want to keep mentioning this mysterious phase two to try and get us curious about it, which can work very well in a narrative. But here it's annoying me a little bit, I will say, as I love the series, as you know, but this, it just feels a bit like they're trying too hard to, make us really curious. But there's not really much that's going to pay off about that, and I don't know how long we're going to wait into the next season before we actually get any information about this phase two business. So it's, yeah, that's something that's a little bit of a criticism. I feel like that, a few more breadcrumbs so that we've at least got something to speculate on would have been nice for that. But anyway, it's what it is. And it does make me wonder about Wilzig, obviously the Enclave scientist that defected. So did he have an association with Kate Williams or Lee Moldiver? This, obviously that's the same woman. That he knew to take the diode to her. Like, what was the connection, and the fact that he was visiting Vault Tech as well? Um, I think it would be good to know a bit more about his background, because I think he's obviously more involved in this than we first thought. Um, did he know what the plan was? Obviously, he ended up in the Enclave. Was that from before the war? And then they kept him alive somehow, and they nudged Barb in the right direction and told her to say that Vault-Tec would drop the bombs and all that kind of thing. So, it's very interesting, but I can kind of see that he was potentially, Kate Williams's man on the inside in the government, and what would go on to become the Enclave. So it could be that there's a connection there, and that was always his plan, was that when he was in a position to do so, he would steal the diode and leave the Enclave and find her. Hard to say, but I suspect we'll get more answers to that. I hope we will anyway, because otherwise, that's the thing. If they're going to set up all these storylines, they do need to tie off, and they need to tie off in a way that's kind of satisfying for people. Otherwise, it does get a wee bit frustrating. Um, but clearly, we're setting up the Enclave to be the big bad in season three, which I'm here for. I think that's going to be very interesting. I'm curious to see what they're going to do with it. I've got some aeroplanes. Airports are weird places. Like, they feel like they're just so far removed from the rest of the world. It's a bizarre thing, airports. Anyway. So yeah, Max and Lucy have been reunited, which is lovely. It's nice that Lucy has this kind of ending with her dad, and now she's moving on to a new chapter with this man that she's met that she kind of likes. Obviously we've got the burgeoning romance between the two of them, which is sweet. And they go up to the penthouse to talk, and they look out over Vegas. And I think it's quite interesting that Mr. House doesn't show himself to them. So maybe he's wanting to listen in and find out what their plans are, what they intend to do before deciding whether he wants to kind of contact them and speak to them. That's how Mr. House likes to operate. He likes to have all the information he can before he makes any decisions, and any kind of, if he asks somebody to do something for him, then he would obviously compensate them, and vice versa. If someone wants him to do something, then they have to pay in kind and do something for him. It's all transactional. That's the way House works. And that's how he is able to predict things, because he has the ability to, kind of calculate all these probabilities, but he needs the data in order to do that. So very, very interesting to see where they go next. I did like the little background detail of the sign that says casino that's damaged, so only the word sin is lit on it, which is, one of the names for Las Vegas is Sin City because of the gambling and all the other stuff that goes on there, which is interesting. And the girl's probably going to be heading for Colorado, so whether he's going to get that far or what's going to be happening, it does feel like the super mutants are going to be making an appearance based on this season if they are recruiting their fellow mutants to go up against the Enclave. So that's going to be interesting to see what's become of them and what's going on with the Enclave as well. And then the kind of end credit scene we got with the Brotherhood, because we haven't really heard from them since Max and Thaddeus ran away, but Quintus is now Quintus the Destroyer. He's changed his tune, which is kind of fun, and he's going to be building a new Liberty Prime, so that is going to be fun to see, I think, given that the producers and the directors for this show, they do like doing everything as practical as they can, sort of practical special effects rather than CGI, which I love. And I did see a clip of an interview with Jonathan Nolan, and he seems to be very excited about the prospect of bringing Liberty Prime to life for real, so I am looking forward to seeing that. I don't know if I can get up there. Oh, yeah, so that's going to be very interesting. I did really enjoy this season. I didn't feel like there was an awful lot that I didn't like or anything missing. They are juggling a lot of different storylines, which isn't always a good thing with these because sometimes things get lost. And if you don't see a particular kind of character for a period of time, like we don't really know what's happened in Vault 33 at the end of this season. Did Steph give them the water like she promised? What's going to happen there? So, they are tying it together more than it kind of maybe first appears. But all of our main protagonists have had their worldview shaken up. They've been tested, and a little sprinkling of trauma, which is all character development. But there's a lot of questions and maybe not as many answers as some of us hoped. Um, I think the thing with House, obviously, he said there's another player at the table. There's things that I can't predict, and one of them is the Enclave that was a step ahead of House. So it had to be them or the people that would become the Enclave that deployed that death claw in Alaska. And so Robert House at one point in this season asks Cooper like, "What if I'm the House always wins, but what if I'm not the House? What if someone else is?" But, governments have long been known for covering things up. We know this, it's been seen time and time again through history. So even a man as powerful as Robert House can only do so much against the government's decades of experience of hiding all their secrets from the world. Because obviously when secrets come out, it tends to cause scandal, which is very embarrassing, as we have seen and probably will see again in the future. But I think Lucy, her character development has progressed in a really interesting way, which I do like. She has become someone that understands more about who she really is. She's also started to accept the fact that, how much of a monster her father really is. That he, the the fear in her when she realised that he intended to use the mind control device on her to make her his little girl again, and the way that he's trying to control her and treat her like a child, and that really is I'm very frustrated on her behalf, because it's creepy and it's wrong. Just saying you'll understand later, which is like you'll understand when you grow up. Daddy's job is complicated, sweetie. It's just so really gives me the ick. And she doesn't want to give up her right to self determination and her ability to think for herself and make decisions for herself. Because who would want to give that up? It's really very few people would want to consciously decide to give up any sort of self control or self determination over their own lives. That's just not really negotiable for people. And instead of Hank facing up to what he did and facing up to the fact that his daughter thinks he is a monster now, and the fact that she's contemplated killing him more than once at this point, instead of kind of dealing with that or facing up to that, he just deletes his memories. And we don't know if this is reversible or not. If it's not, he's probably going to get eaten by a death claw or something. But the fact that he just deleted himself, and it is, as I said earlier, it's a form of suicide, really, because he's not Hank anymore, and that she has to realize that he's just it. It would have been easier for Lucy, I think, if he just shot himself in the head than doing what he did and formatting the hard drive essentially so that he didn't recognize her, and for her having to look into his eyes and she doesn't he doesn't recognize her anymore. He's looking at her like she's a stranger. That is just pure torture. It's so, so cruel. So I really hope something horrible happens because it's just really um yeah, I do feel for her, but she's starting to kind of come into her own and accept who she is, and that's important. And I think Cooper Howard slash the Ghoul, again, he's making sacrifices for his family. He's never stopped doing that. And he's been through so much, he's changed so much. He's had a long and complicated life becoming a ghoul and everything that he's had to do to survive and to keep going, but it's still the same thing. It's still the same motive. That has never changed. It's about his daughter, it's about his family, knowing what happened to them and keeping them safe. That's always been the goal for him. So but he is starting to kind of maybe reconsider his approach of shooting first and asking questions later, that maybe that's not always the best thing to do. And the fact that he does, when he could have easily just taken Hank out, and he didn't do that, he chose to injure him enough to save Lucy and then let her decide what to do with him, which I think shows a bit of kind of growth, and the fact that he's maybe starting to regain some more of his humanity, which I like to see. And I think the thing about it is that Hank is making it out like the Legion's the biggest threat and he could do something about it. But the Legion isn't the biggest threat anymore. They're not. I mean, they might get better at setting traps. Although they were always good at that. Hiding landmines under dead bodies so that people get blown up when they go to try and help, which is very, very sneaky. Um, but he claims that the surface is the experiment and not the vaults, and that's just not true, because the vaults were experiments too. We know that. We've seen it time and time again in the games. Vault 4, it, yeah, so he is lying to her about that, which again doesn't surprise me. And it does seem to be that the Enclave have been monitoring things far more closely than we thought, but he still refuses to tell Lucy what he's really doing, and then takes himself out so that she can't find that, and it prevents him from taking any kind of accountability for what he's done. I have to say, Chet's grin when they're banging on the overseer's office door is really interesting. Maybe he's just happy that people are seeing him now and realising that Stephanie isn't the good person that they thought she was. I don't really know what to make of that, but she's obviously um ready to just kind of go scorched earth if she has to with these people. But she obviously is contacting the Enclave and saying we need to start phase 2. So I'm assuming that we will find out what phase 2 is in season 3. I can't even speculate on what that might actually be, because I don't think it's going to be just the mind control boxes. I think there's got to be more to it than that. So I guess we'll see. But I did like the detail of her saying that this is Hank McLean's wife while she's standing there in her wedding dress and veil and her bridal eye patch, which is a fun little detail. And I think Norm is proven to be very interesting. He didn't get an awful lot of screen time in this season. I think I would have liked to have seen a wee bit more about how he's kind of adapting and how he's handling this situation. But he is proven to have the same kind of stubbornness and resilience as his sister. And I think it's going to be interesting to see what he does going forward. It was definitely a bit of a baptism by fire. But you know, again, it's teaching somebody that's new to the wasteland. It's teaching them that it is a cruel and inhospitable place. And this part of the US post war is much better developed than the East Coast tends to be. The Mojave area didn't take a lot of damage from the bombs thanks to Mr. House's efforts and all the rest of it. But, just the fact that all these managers got eaten by the radroaches, which are easily the most pathetic enemies that you could face. I mean, don't get me wrong, I feel like I would still be very unhappy if a 4 foot long cockroach came up to my face because they're disgusting, but it's, it's one of these things, and it's only people that are going to have the fortitude to survive that are going to survive in the wasteland. So we are setting up for season 3, but I say one criticism I have seen about season 2 is that, it's juggling a lot of storylines, which means that some things don't get a lot of kind of screen time. And I do kind of agree with that. I mean, I think 8 episodes for a season, it's not a lot. It's certainly far less than what we used to get for TV series. Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which has been one of my favourites since it came out back in the day. The first season was a half season, so it was 11 episodes, and then every subsequent season was 22. But now we're only getting 8, and I mean, don't get me wrong, I imagine they cost a lot of money to produce and things, but when you're juggling that many storylines in 8 hour long episodes, it has to be really tight for it to work, for us to, sort of feel interested and keep up with everything that's going on without getting too lost. And I do think that there were some things that maybe needed a wee bit more screen time and a wee bit more development. But on the whole, I really enjoyed it. I'm really interested to see what comes in season 3 because, some things have ended. I think what happened with Hank McLean is feeling a wee bit unsatisfying. And it's unclear if that's his story over in this, if that's him now. He's deleted his memories. He doesn't know who he is, and he's just sitting on the steps of the Lucky 38. Like, is that it over for him? Is he going to come back? Is the memory wipe going to be reversible in any case? When we know that's the case for the synths, that the memory wipe can be undone in some cases. So it's hard to say. It's hard to say, but yeah. On the whole, I really enjoyed it. I think we just maybe needed a wee bit more screen time for certain things. Maybe a wee bit more development of the storyline and stuff. And obviously, all the crew from Vault 31, we barely got to know them before they were all dead. But I guess that was kind of the point. But yeah. As I say, it's one of these things, and the Enclave being the enemy again, it's not a surprise. So I know it's like, oh, well, we've done that several times now at this point with the Enclave, and that's true, but it kind of makes sense that, that even if Adam's Air Force Base was destroyed, that doesn't mean that the Enclave's over. If Raven Rock was destroyed and the oil rig and all the rest of it. So I don't know. I'd say I think we need to know a bit more about what phase 2 is, and that is the other kind of main criticism that I have is this. Everybody talks about this phase 2, but it's just done in such a way where it's trying too hard to sound mysterious. But because it's been mentioned so many times by so many different people, it's like, well, how big a secret is it if all these people know what it is? What but we haven't had really much in the way of hints as to what it actually is going to be and what's going to be involved. So I don't know. It's a difficult one. I don't know how I feel about it, but If you guys have any thoughts, any theories on it, let me know in the comments. I would love to hear it. It would be ridiculous if it was just like the Institute in Phase 3, where it was just a brand new nuclear reactor. Um, given that everybody's been fighting over this cold fusion diode, but Robert House isn't going to give that up without a fight, that's for sure. I don't know. But let me know what you guys think. Hopefully you've enjoyed listening to my thoughts and speculation and ramblings on this series. It's yeah, I say it's really, really good to see. I do love the acting is fantastic. All the actors in it have been spot on. The costume design, set design, and everything is phenomenal. The use of music is absolutely top notch. It's pretty much perfect. So we'll see. We'll see what happens in season 3. That was a hollowed out rock here with a whetstone in it. Nice. Yeah, we'll see what happens in season 3. But hopefully you enjoyed listening to me ramble about it while we wandered on Mojave. Let me know your thoughts in the comments on the season overall or on this last episode. And I'll catch you guys next time. Bye.